Alright, I am attaching a 4-panel skirt to a 1860s bodice, kind of a work dress. Anyway, I like to do pleats because, well, frankly it's easier to stitch than gathers. So this time, here's the side I've already done. But the method I used this time, instead of trying to measure everything out ahead of time, I just kind of did a divide and conquer method where I found the center between 2 points on the bodice and the center between 2 points on the skirt and brought them together and then pinned them. And then you keep doing that over and over again up to a certain point where there's just, a couple of inches between each section. So for instance, maybe about here and then here. Anyway, and once I get to that point, that's where I do use measuring just so that the pleats are even on the outside. And I use my seam gauge here, and that is the distance between each pleat. So I've done this front section. So you start at the front of the bodice. So here we go. So you can see the sleeve. There's the front. This dress is going to be buttoning down the front. And I've done this section. Each of those pins represents one pleat. The fabric underneath that folds over here is not necessarily going to be as even because it's kind of basically a guesstimate. But on the outside, once I have it sewn, it'll be more obvious, or it'll look better. But each of these pleats is, or at least should be, about that distance apart. Since I only have one hand, it's hard to show. Okay, next section. I'm going to go ahead and do my divide and conquer, and then we'll pick up where I left off. I take it back. I'm actually going to stitch this section before I go on to the next. I just pinned that, so I'll leave that pin here. I'm going to go ahead and stitch this section, and then I can reclaim all of these pins because I'm going to need them. Alright, I've stitched it. I found it was easier to do about a quarter of the skirt at a time. That way there are fewer pins that I have to pin myself with. And so there I went from here all the way to here. And this is the skirt, so you can see there's the first panel ends there. And now to pin the next section. And this is actually my last section since I already did the first half. Because I divided the 4 panels at the side seams, there is actually the distance from the front to the side seam is greater than the distance from the side seam to the center back. That's, you can kind of see that from here to here is bigger than from here to here. That means that I have one panel, skirt panel, that goes from here to here and one that goes from here to here, so there's actually more fabric for this back section. And the way that I dealt with it on this half is by kind of doing a double pleat. I pleated the same amount you know, I made the pleat on the outside the same distance, but to deal with all this extra fabric, rather than have a very deep pleat, because it would have been about that deep, I doubled it up, and you can see that this is actually, so it's a double pleat on the inside, that I could have made it twice as deep. And the reason I did this is so that as you wear it, that the skirt, I think it adds a little bit more, oh, I don't know, I want to say bustle, although they didn't really have bustles for that time period, but it adds just a little fullness and fabric in the back, and I think it hangs more nicely if you don't have quite so deep pleats. And so the double pleating just deals with that. Once I have this done, we'll try it on and show you. Alright, I've pinned it. You can tell based on my finger about how much distance we have between each of these pins. And there's our last little section right there. And there's a lot of fabric to pleat into a little distance, and that's why I did the double pleats. It's just easier. I will pleat one and show you. Alright, so here's the first pleat, and what I'm going to do is somehow can't do this one-handed very easily, but basically I'm going to fold it over, then fold it over again like that. Alright, I've done it. So here it is. I've pleated it twice. I do make sure that this little fold here on the inside pleat, on the second pleat, does not extend as far as the first fold, because once you show the other, when you turn it back the right side out, here we go, right here. I don't want this pleat to be quite so obvious, because if I have that fold out here, it'll show here. And we just want the first pleat to show, and the other one can just be nested underneath. Alright, when I get to the very last pleat, the distance from here to here may not be exactly half the pleat, but basically I'm going to eyeball it and have this pleat in the center. And then we'll call it good. Alright, all done. And there wasn't exactly, let's see if we can't get this to, there we go. Like there wasn't enough here to do a double pleat. I'm pretty sure that I had a double pleat here, or close to it. It is not going to matter once this is all sewn together. Now to stitch. Alright, so basically to stitch this, I just pick it up where I left off and finish.